movement. And Lorenzo, we keep getting gray boxes popping up and down. Not sure what is causing it, but
No.
we have a little one there now. Okay, good.
Let me start again.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sometimes it helps if the video is off for the broadcaster.
Okay. Let's see. That worked.
Okay, great. We're just going to take one more minute here. Welcome to those just joining. Please introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and pronouns, where you are in the state, and something that made you smile recently. Oh, we would love to hear about that. And we're just going to get started here shortly. It's good to see everybody. Welcome, welcome.
Is it clear now?
We have one gray box. Oh, now it's just the small one. So that one would be okay. If we can't get rid of it, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to get started, and we are recording. So continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, and we're going to get this show on the road. We love to start and end on time here at Renewable Heat Now, so we're going to kick this off now. My name is Lisa Marshall. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Organizing and Advocacy with New Yorkers for Clean Power. New Yorkers for Clean Power is one of the founding members of the Renewable Heat Now campaign, and it is my pleasure to be one of the lead organizers for this wonderful campaign, and that has really done so much excellent work across New York, and has welcomed all of you into the fold. So next slide, please, Lorenzo, and we'll just introduce you to our campaign for anyone who might be new, although I see a lot of familiar names here. So going over tonight's agenda, we're going to just introduce the Renewable Heat Now campaign and give a quick report back from a great 2-day planning retreat that we just had in Albany. I think it was just last week. Maybe it was the week before, not 100% sure. And at that retreat, we came together and really defined our platform, the Building Electrification Equity Platform, which we're going to put into a letter to the governor. And you're going to hear all about the components of that platform and how you can help make that the policy of New York State. Then we're going to go over our campaign strategy, timeline, and tactics, and we're going to plan for upcoming actions to win all of this good stuff next year in 2025, which is not so far from now. Next slide, please. So Renewable Heat Now is a campaign, not an organization. It's made of many organizations, more than 20. We just welcomed our newest official member last week, which is Third Act Upstate. And we're so happy to have Third Act joining as an official Renewable Heat Now member. We also work with lots of other organizations that aren't official members. And if your organization loves working with the Renewable Heat Now campaign and wants to be a named member on our website and on our materials, please get in touch with me and I'll walk you through. It's a pretty simple process, and we love to have lots of members. Our membership consists of very small, very local grassroots groups, all the way to statewide organizations, national organizations, organizations that are specialized in policy, organizations like NYGO that promote the workforce and installation of heat pumps, and on and on. So we have a very diverse group of orgs working together for the same goals. Next slide, please. New York Heat. The Renewable Heat Now campaign was started about 8 years ago with the idea that the biggest source of greenhouse gases in New York is actually from our buildings. And there was no campaign at that time to figure out how to decarbonize our buildings and reduce these harmful emissions. Most of our buildings are burning fossil fuels, mostly fracked gas for heating, for producing their hot water, and for cooking. And those emissions account for a huge portion of our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as polluting the air inside our homes. And they're fairly unsafe ways of heating and cooking as well, and we have a lot of data to back that up. But the other problem with the gas is that fracking and moving fracked gas from the gas fields of Pennsylvania through New York State, through pipelines, through compressor stations, into homes and into our stoves, furnaces, and water heaters, that methane gas leaks all along the way from wellhead to flame tip. And that leaked methane, we have learned more and more, is actually an accelerant to global warming, an accelerant to the atmospheric warming that we're experiencing here on our lovely planet Earth. Over the short term, over a 20-year time frame, methane gas is almost 100 times more warming than an equivalent molecule of carbon dioxide. It does degrade in the atmosphere over time. So over 100 years, it's only 25 times more warming than carbon dioxide. But in the time when our atmosphere is warming rapidly and our planet and weather patterns are so rapidly changing, this is like squirting like lighter fluid onto your charcoal grill. It's really bumping up the accelerating the climate crisis at a time where we need to be doing the exact opposite. And so Renewable Heat Now as a campaign was founded to sort of figure out how we stop the bad and promote the good, meaning the clean, efficient 21st century heating systems of that we all need to have in our buildings, including air source and ground source heat pumps and thermal energy networks, as well as efficient electric stoves and appliances. So that was a mouthful. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier this month, over 40 organizations gathered together in Albany. These are orgs that are members of Renewable Heat Now, and sometimes, in some cases, friends of Renewable Heat Now. And we came together for 2 days to really put our heads together. What have we learned from the past years of this campaign? What do we need to accomplish, and how are we going to do it? So the first day, we really honed in on Governor Hochul. As we know, New York is a state where the governor has a lot of power. Governor Hochul has promised us various things in her budget the past few years in response to our I see you, Jesse. It is in response to our advocacy, but has not really followed through on the things that she's promised. And so we're really focusing our first phase of advocacy on the governor with the idea that we're going to ask her to put certain things about building decarbonization into her executive budget. And her executive budget, as Liz will explain to you later, really sets the tone for the whole budget process in Albany. So we really need her to be a leader, to stand up and to respond to our demands. And we're going to talk about all of those in detail on this meeting, and you're going to hear from a bunch of different presenters who've been working on different pieces of this platform that we put together, and why it's important and why we're including this in our demands of Governor Hochul. So this is a picture we took during the retreat because we also moseyed over to where the state energy planning process was kicking off in our t-shirts with our signs and made our presence known there, which is a nice little field trip we took on the first day of our retreat. Next slide, please. Okay, the Building Electrification Equity Platform, fondly known as BEEP, is this letter that we have put together the past 3 years. So this will be BEEP 4.0, or the 4th year we're doing it. And this, as I said, is a letter focused on the governor. And it's been very successful strategy in getting her to make some commitments. It isn't just the letter. We also do other advocacy, but the letter sort of kicks it all off. And you might remember a couple of years ago, the governor in her State of the State made a commitment to electrifying or getting electric ready 2 million New York homes by 2030. And I was, and she did that because we specifically asked her to do that in the first BEEP letter. And then we had a lot of meetings with her asking her to do that over and over with different advocacy groups. And we're going to be asking your groups to do that again this year. And when she made that announcement at her State of the State, you know, I was working on some programs with some of the state agencies at the time. And it was really exciting for me to be in meetings with these state agency folks saying, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to make the governor's mandate of 2 million electric or electric ready homes by 2030 a real thing, you know. So she said it, and then the agencies were doing it because we asked them to, and we asked her to. So that's very exciting. So some of the things that she put in her budget last year came right out of our platform letter. And some of these are parts of the New York Heat Act that we asked for. So you can see these are sort of quotes from what she put into her letter. And I think that the link to last year's BEEP letter already has been shared with you in the chat, or it might be again. So what's going to be in this year's BEEP letter, now that we put our heads together to think, you know, what are the most strategic, impactful things we can ask the governor to do that we really think we can win this year in the building decarbonization realm. So let's go into that. Next slide. Oh, I forgot about this slide. So this is the year we're going to get this stuff done, not just empty promises. It's going to be the best year ever. Last year we got 200 sign-ons or so for this letter. So let's see if we can get 300 for the letter this year. You're going to ask, can I see this letter? The answer is not yet. It will be ready probably next week. So get ready, because we're going to be circulating this letter to all of your organizations to sign on. And that does not have to be a climate group. It can be any kind of, it can be your indivisible group. It can be your synagogue. It can be your women's club, whatever group you're a member of that cares about the future of New York State can sign on to this letter. And you'll be hearing more from me and Andra about this letter shortly, so get ready. But what's going to be in the letter? So we aimed to choose 3 items for the letter, and we landed on 4 because they were all so important. We couldn't leave any of them out. They are, some of them will seem very familiar to you, because the first was, of course, the New York Heat Act. And many of you are here because you've been working on the New York Heat Act for a couple of years and really want to see it passed. The second is establishing something called the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund, or GAP Fund. The third is setting binding targets for capping greenhouse gas emissions from utilities, from gas utilities. And the fourth is decarbonizing the 15 most highly emitting state facilities, which includes the Capitol building complex. And we'll have a presenter talking about each one of these very important priorities and why we included it in the BEEP letter. So let's dig in. And if you have questions about any of these, please type them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. Okay, so the New York Heat Act, HEAT is an acronym. It stands for Home Energy Affordable Transition. And it has a lot of benefits that we love to talk about. We're going to upgrade our homes and buildings. We're going to defend our health with that indoor air quality that's going to be improved. We're going to protect our planet and cut our costs. And how does the New York Heat Act do all of this? Next slide. So there's basically 3 pillars of the New York Heat Act. And we really believe that, like a 3-legged stool, that these pillars all need to go together for the stools to be stand up and be stable, and meaning that the policy will be good and will really work for people and for the state. So we have a tagline that's cleaner heat, lower bills. And I'm putting that on there to remind all of you that every time you talk about the New York Heat Act to your neighbor, to your sister, to your mom, to your spouse, or to your legislator, you're going to say the words cleaner heat and lower bills. And we're just going to keep saying that over and over and over so that we remember what this New York Heat Act is about. So the 3 pillars are that it updates our old, outdated public service law. Those laws were basically written to promote gas and favor gas. Those laws say that the utilities have to give everyone gas, which it's very important that the utilities have to serve all their customers, right? We would never want utilities to be able to discriminate against any customer. But we don't want them to be able to discriminate against clean energy in favor of dirty energy. And right now, it basically says they have to keep serving gas. So until we change that, the gas utilities will keep making more and more investments of your money in the gas infrastructure, billions and billions of dollars worth, and they literally are not allowed to use that same money to build thermal energy networks, to do behind the meter improvements in our houses, like give us gas stoves or do our wiring or give us heat pumps. And we need to change that because this is really not compliant with the climate law. So it also unlocks money that could be used to, I just said that, to upgrade our homes with these state-of-the-art appliances. Right now, not only are we having to pay to provide gas, but we're also having to pay to expand the gas system, to give hookups to new homes and buildings, or to people who want to convert off of oil to gas. And right now, if people want to do that, we all pay for it. So we would love to pay for people to help people get into heat pumps, to help people get to electrify, and we don't want to keep paying to subsidize the expansion of the fracked gas system. And thirdly, and very importantly, it provides energy bill relief and consumer protection. So many New Yorkers, about a quarter of New Yorkers, are paying too much for energy, more than they can really afford. And this situation, as more and more homes and buildings get off the gas system and electrify, leaves more people at risk of paying even more for their bills. And we can't have that. That would be very unfair and just wrong. So we're not going to do that. We're going to limit everyone's energy bill to 6% of their household income, which is what's considered affordable by the federal government and by New York State. And that's already a policy of New York, but it's not encoded into law. So we're going to make sure that people who are paying too much now get bill relief, and people who are stuck on the gas system in the future, as the transition happens, don't get stuck paying unaffordable cost of maintaining the gas system. So we really believe strongly we need all three of these pieces together to pass as the New York Heat Act, because one without the other really doesn't accomplish the goals of the CLCPA and doesn't protect our people, doesn't create the jobs, doesn't protect our health and safety, and doesn't really protect the planet. So that's it for the New York Heat Act. And it's my great pleasure to turn over this presentation to a wonderful advocate and longtime friend who's been working in the climate and energy space for as long as I have or longer, Amber Johnson with the Energy Democracy Alliance. So take it away, Amber.
Can you guys hear me? I think so, right?
You
Cool.
sound good. We can't spotlight Amber, but we can hear you.
Yes, my apologies. What happens when you live in the middle of New York, in the mountains, you don't get good service. So sometimes you either can see me or hear me, and I think you guys want to hear me today. There might be times you just want to see me and not hear what I have to say. That's not today. But today we're going to talk about the GAP Fund, right? And GAP Fund stands for Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund. It's okay if you forget it. That's a lot. We call it the GAP Fund for a reason, but I'll tell you what it means in a second. But we're going to talk about what the problem is, right? So like, why are we even talking about a GAP Fund? So a lot of our homes here in New York, right, they have toxic materials, outdated energy systems, that all endanger our health and our future, right? Thousands of New Yorkers can't really, pay the cost of upgrades and repairs. It's unaffordable. I don't know about y'all, but my home's not electrified, and if my furnace went out, I don't think I can afford a new furnace or to electrify my home at this point, right? And most New Yorkers fall in that category. And as we are moving towards a whole home electrification, right, due to its benefits, we all want an electrified home, where people are facing barriers, right, to this road to weatherization and electrification. And these barriers especially prevent low to moderate income households. And when I say barriers, I mean like physical barriers to getting electrification. And these include mold, lead, asbestos, pest infestation, and other health hazards, right? And these are all common in older buildings. And I don't know about y'all, but where I live, a lot of the housing stock is pretty old, right? We have these really big old homes. So if you move to the next slide, right? So let's talk about what the GAP fund is, right? So the GAP fund will pay to make our homes safe, covering the cost of those who need it the most. So from removing lead and mold from the walls to upgrading hazardous wiring systems, the GAP fund will fund this switch to modern, clean, affordable energy that protects our planet and our children. So the GAP fund essentially addresses these electrification barriers that I talked about that are not covered by current existing programs, right? So it'll provide funding to fill in the gaps. You get it? The GAP fund. You hear me? We're on this. That people have from the current existing programs that are out there, right? And this is available for both renters and for homeowners. I think next slide. Thank you. So why do we need the GAP fund, right? So here are some reasons on why I think that we need the GAP fund. So low income households often face the biggest barriers to electrification, right? And this is due to living in older homes. Older homes are more affordable, but the housing stock is old and they usually need higher maintenance. They have pre-existing health and hazards like mold, and also a lack of maintenance from landlords that already don't have the funds to make these improvements, right? Another reason why we need the GAP fund is that New York State's committed to 2 million climate-friendly homes by 2030. It's almost 2025. 2030 is right around the corner, right? We're really not on track, right? So 800,000 of these climate-friendly homes must be electrification ready, and they must be low-income household. We're not there yet. And in order to get there and to meet these goals, the state needs to be prepared to assist low-income homes with these barriers so that people can be on the proper road to weatherization and electrification. Another reason why we need the GAP fund is a just transition requires that we prioritize these households that I'm talking about, right? So we need to prioritize low-income households that do not receive support and investment from the state to be able to electrify their homes on their own. So if we're not helping low-income households to electrify their home, it's not going to happen, right? And we need to make sure that low to moderate income households can get off the gas system. Because if not, they're going to be participating in an increasingly expensive and toxic system for themselves and for their homes and for their families. Another reason why the GAP fund is important is that there are massive health and quality of life improvements that come with these pre-electrification steps, right? So we have electrical upgrades, we have weatherization, the toxics go away, our indoor air quality is better, we have a better all quality of life, right? Next slide. Perfect. So we all love the GAP fund, right? We're all GAP. We love it, right? Perfect. So what are we going to do about it? How can we move forward with advocating for the GAP fund? So if I didn't mention this already, I'm with the New York Energy Democracy Alliance. I'm the organizing and training director, which I should have said in the beginning. Anyway, we have GAP campaign calls that are open to anybody that would like to work on GAP, and we meet the first and third Wednesdays every month at 2 p.m. Where we strategize and talk about GAP and get GAP fund updates. Great time. Some other things that we're up to right now, right? We are meeting with bill sponsors. So if my memory serves me right, we are meeting with Senator Gonzalez and Assemblymember Kellis. They're the bill sponsors for the GAP fund. So we're meeting with them. We just finished adding more stuff to the GAP fund, and now we're continuing meeting with them. We're also developing outreach materials and messaging, right? I know some of y'all are really good with messaging. We need to make sure that the GAP fund is something that is tangible and that folks can understand, regardless of if you're in a climate group or not. We need to make sure people understand this because it's necessary for us to living in clean and energy efficient homes, right? So we're also meeting with local groups and local legislators. So organizations are meeting with their members and talking about the GAP fund. They're meeting with their legislators and talking about the GAP fund. So we're just socializing the GAP fund, which is great. So along with socializing the GAP fund, we're collecting case studies, right? We want stories. We want stories of, from people who have issues with electrifying their homes, people that are energy burdened. We're collecting case studies to add to that so folks can know that the GAP fund's wanted all over, right? And then lastly, we're developing sample resolutions for towns and municipalities to pass so that there's some real strong and tangible support for the GAP fund, so that we can pass it next year. It's going to be great. I think that's it. I think I'm done. That's my last slide. I think I'm gonna pass it over to the next presenter.
Okay, thank you so much, Amber. Really appreciate you hopping on, and it's so good to have you. I want to turn it now to Malak Nazardine. I think that's right, from the
You got
Building
it.
Decarbonization Coalition. And I know we have a bunch of nerds on this call, so get ready for some nerdy stuff. You will love it. Oops, there we go.
I'm gonna try to keep it not too nerdy and accessible, but hi everyone. As Lisa said, I'm Malak Nasruddin. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with the Building Decarbonization Coalition's New York team. And I really quickly want to first say I'm just so excited to get to talk to you all about this issue, as it really is so critical to bringing some meaningful emissions reductions from our existing gas system, and to giving the Public Service Commission, which is the regulator that regulates these gas utilities, some additional legal teeth to be able to enforce the climate law as it should apply to these utilities. So briefly, what we would be asking for is for binding emissions caps to be set on gas utilities. And why do we need this? Why is this a priority? So right now, the climate law sets economy-wide emissions reduction targets. As you all probably know, we've got the 40% by 2030 target and 85% by 2050. But the climate law does not assign a specific amount of those reductions to the building sector. And by building sector, I mean gas emissions. Even though, as we already know, buildings account for the greatest source of greenhouse gases in the state. However, the climate law does require that the Department of Environmental Conservation, which is the agency in charge of implementing the climate law. Sorry, that's my daughter. It's her bedtime. It does require the Department of Environmental Conservation to directly address emissions from buildings. And so far, the department has not done that. And so in the absence of this action that we really need from DEC, which is the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Public Service Commission has also not shown a willingness to hold these gas utilities to any specific amount of emissions reductions. And so we're seeing this play out really heavily in the long-term gas planning proceeding, where we see gas utilities coming out with their gas utility plans, and they're taking the position that essentially, so long as they're showing some amount of emissions reductions, that's it, that they've technically complied with the climate law. But we all know that we need more than that, especially given that our gas emissions make up such a big proportion of our greenhouse gases. So we really need regulation to hold these gas utilities to their fair share of emissions reductions if we're going to have a hope of meeting our climate targets. And if you're interested in reading and learning more, I can drop a link in the chat to comments that we filed with approximately 75 other organizations last spring that discusses this issue in greater depth as it related to the New York Cap and Invest process. So now I'm gonna, Lisa, unless you think you wanted to say anything, I was gonna turn it over.
Yeah. So Malak has to do bedtime, but please do share the filing, and people please ask questions of Malak, because she's really an expert on this. And I think you might remember, if you've been with Renewable Heat now for a long time, before we started working on legislation, you might remember we were working on something called the gas planning proceeding. That was, we were telling the Department of Public Service to do a proceeding that was going to require all the utilities to file a gas plan to be compliant with the CLCPA, or the climate law. And so we did that, and now they're filing those plans. But because these emissions limits for gas utilities have not been set, the utilities are still just saying, oh, we're going to still serve gas. We're just going to, make it a little bit lower emission in this way or that way. And if you're interested in some of the sneaky things they're trying to do, stay tuned for a teach-in on false climate solutions on October 1st. Okay, So we're going to turn it over now to a wonderful and longtime activist, one of the people who's been working on the issues of around fracked gas and fracking for as long as anybody in New York. Ruth Foster from the Sheridan Hollow group known as Share, and I can remember all the other words. So Ruth, you're going to have to say what it is. And Ruth is going to talk about the
Okay.
fourth demand in the Sears Beep platform letter. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, hi, and I think I know a lot of you. Ruth Foster, and I'm with the Sheridan Hollow Alliance for Renewable Energy here in Albany. And Sheridan Hollow, right now, you're looking at the Capitol. Sheridan Hollow, if you just go left about 2 or 3 blocks and go down a steep hill, that's Sheridan Hollow. It's a low-income neighborhood in Albany. We've been working for a couple of years to get the Renewable Capital Act passed, and that would require the Capitol, the Empire State Plaza, and other state-owned buildings in downtown Albany to run on renewable energy within 3 years. And the other buildings, the one in the background there is the Smith Building. That's one of the buildings. They're all the buildings that are connected to the Sheridan Avenue Steam Plant, which is what heats and powers all the buildings in Albany. And the Sheridan Avenue Steam Plant is in Sheridan Hollow. So next slide. So why do we want to make the Capitol renewable? And obviously we need to meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So we need to decarbonize all our buildings. And we think the Capitol is a really good place to start. First off, it's owned by the Office of General Services, New York State, and it's run by the New York Power Authority, or NYPA. And if New York State can't meet our climate goals really soon, how do we expect the private sector to? The state governments should be way ahead, and we should be doing this quickly. 2 years ago, there was in the budget, there was something called the Decarbonization Action Plans, I think is what it was called. And they required plans to decarbonize the 15 largest greenhouse gas emitting state-owned facilities. Unfortunately, there was no timeline on actually getting all those done. The plans, they have a number of years, and then there's no real requirement that they actually implement the plans. The other reason, so we really want to get this moving quickly, and we think that the Capitol and the Empire State Plaza, as a symbol of New York State government and as one of the largest state-run facilities, should be up near the top of the list of ones that are transitioned quickly. And also, we need NYPA. We've been working with NYPA for years, and they don't know anything about renewable energy from what we've learned in many meetings with them. They're starting to learn now. They hadn't for years. And we think that it's really important for NYPA to get on board and learn how to decarbonize these facilities. They're right in Albany. It would be a great place for them to start. And right now, this whole Capitol complex, and you can see the smoke coming out of that smokestack. That's where Sheridan Hollow is. And you can see the buildings in Albany that when the wind blows, the smoke comes up into downtown Albany. Often it just falls in the hollow where the people live. So next slide. The plant, you can, again, in this picture, you can see the smokestacks. Those are smokestacks from the, well, the big ones from they're from 2 plants in downtown Albany that burn, that pollute the neighborhood in order to heat and cool the Empire State Plaza. The building in the front is kind of block 1, or it's actually the one on the far left, is the Answers plant, which was burning garbage for about 15 years in Albany, but has been shut down for a number of years. And the 2 smokestacks in the back are the ones that are the Sheridan Avenue Steam Plant. So we're trying to shut down the Sheridan Avenue Steam Plant because it has been polluting the neighborhood of Sheridan Hollow for years, and the cancer rates in that neighborhood are really high. So we think it's really important to get the Capitol and all these 15 buildings decarbonized as soon as possible so we can stop polluting environmental justice neighborhoods and start having renewable energy. So I guess I'm supposed to pass it to Liz.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And Ruth has been really working long and hard for energy justice for the residents in the Sheridan Hollow neighborhood. I think you didn't have time to tell the story, but there used to be a horrible incinerator that provided power to those buildings, and the pollution and ashes just would go raining down right into people's homes. It was absolutely disgraceful. And then we replaced that with gas, which is still pretty bad. So be such a beautiful, beautiful landmark project for the governor to be super proud of, to put to decarbonize the Capitol buildings and the 15 other or 14 other most polluting state facilities. And we think that would be such a great thing to brag about in New York, and to really show everybody how we can use thermal energy networks to decarbonize big building complexes and make them and upgrade them to much better and safer, cleaner, and more comfortable technologies. Okay, so passing it now to Liz Moran from Earthjustice, who's going to walk us through. We have a campaign strategy, a timeline, and some tactics. And Liz, big part of her job is prowling the halls of Albany, finding out everything that's going on, and keeping our elected officials accountable to our movement. So Liz, take it away.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction. Sorry for folks who keep seeing my hands on the screen. It's because I'm touching buttons on my phone, and I'm also on my phone. Good to see you all this evening. Liz Moran, New York policy advocate with Earthjustice. I've heard that people really love the way I give legislative timelines, and that's why I'm back. I give the people what they want, and I am here to tell you all about our campaign timeline and tactics and how that overlaps with the legislature and what we can expect at the bare minimum during legislative session. So, taking us from where we are now through April, right now is a key period to begin influencing the governor in the budget process. So I should add this context. The goal has been, particularly with NY Heat and some other policies that we'll be pushing for in the BEEP letter, the state budget seems like the right avenue to advocate for those policies. So using NY Heat as an example, this past year, the governor did include portions of NY Heat in her executive budget proposal. And we got close to getting in the budget, didn't make it across the finish line. Thus, we get to have hopefully a much more successful redux this year. I think we will. So in any case, this timeline is really centered on us influencing the budget process. So the governor's team right now is working to prepare the governor's executive budget proposal. So the timing for our tactics here really makes sense to add that pressure on the governor. So she definitely includes NY Heat and the other BEEP priorities in her executive budget or the State of the State address, so that they're clear priorities for her for this legislative session. So this October, we're going to be circulating the BEEP letter. We're going to deliver the letter to the governor during a news conference. We're going to chase that right away with a call relay. So she hears from us that she needs to take building electrification and acting on climate seriously. Then we're going to have a power hour in October. Moving on to November, key things to keep in mind is Election Day. A lot of what's been impacting the narrative around climate and a number of policies has to do with how the elections pan out. Many speculated that NY Heat was challenging to get done this past year because it was the elections for the members of the legislature. And there are assembly members who are in districts that could potentially swing to Republicans instead of Democrats. They were worried that NY Heat was potentially a threat to them. So the elections really matter in terms of what the legislature is going to look like this coming year. But once that election is done and we know what the shape of our legislature is going to look like, we can use that to jump off the bat, have some social media actions. We're going to prepare for statewide actions in December, have another power hour. So we're going to make sure that everything we're doing in November is reflecting what took place in the election and going full steam ahead. So then December, and this is when we're getting close, right? The governor at this point probably has a lot of her executive budget proposals together behind the scenes. Maybe they're not totally finalized, but like the framework is there. Sometimes, particularly Cuomo used to do this in the like last couple of weeks of December. The governor sometimes rolls out or teases things that might be in the state of the state or the budget. So there's a chance that stuff like that could be happening in December, which is why the 12-12-24 actions are going to be really important. And part of that we will have another power hour, and we're going to start planning and recruiting for a January action. So all of these actions, October through December, are really designed to help add pressure on the governor, and probably to some extent the assembly. The assembly has been a problem during the budget season on a number of climate initiatives. So we're going to have to make sure that assembly members remember we are holding them accountable for NY Heat as well. Now we're entering January. Happy New Year. State of the State address usually is kicked off pretty early on. Shortly after the legislative session starts. The executive budget this coming year will be due the second Tuesday after the first day of the legislative session. So if the legislative session is starting that first week of January, I believe it would put us at like the 13th or 14th, something like that. If it starts a little later, it'd put us at like the 20th, 21st, again, something like that. So that's a fun fact. Back to the executive budget. It's always due the second Tuesday after the first day of legislative session, except the year that a governor is first elected into office. When the governor is first elected, they get until February 1st. So once that executive budget is released, that's kind of like to see if we pass the first exam, and hopefully the governor will have our BEEP priorities in her executive budget, and she'll mention them in her State of the State address, in which case we'll be able to turn a lot of our focus back to the assembly and making sure that they get on board. So we're going to be doing that in January. We're going to work with the bill sponsors of legislation to continue that grassroots action, call relays, and then we'll have our first big statewide mobilization in Albany on January 29th, so save that date. So once that kicks us into February, we're going to have to keep the pressure on the assembly and the governor. We're going to want to make sure that the governor stays strong. Ideally, she puts forward proposals we actually like. We want her to stay strong on, and we need to pressure the assembly to bend to our allies, the Senate, and get closer to where the governor is. There are state budget hearings. The legislature will hold budget hearings after the executive budget is released. That can present some opportunities to have lawmakers, particularly those that are allied with us, ask the agencies questions that could push the executive towards the direction we want to be in, get some good information. So the budget hearings are important to keep an eye on. At the same time, those budget hearings and each house is going to be determining what they're going to put in their one house budgets. So when the governor issues her executive budget proposal, that's just step one. It's all a negotiation. So after the governor puts out her executive budget, both the Senate and the Assembly put out their own versions of the budget. They'll even show up as like amended bills. So that is happening behind the scenes in February. The respective houses will have different conferences to kind of talk through what's going on. So we'll want to really impact legislators during this time and make sure that we're doing some in-district lobbying, some lobbying in Albany to ensure that they're in the right position on our BEEP priorities. And then finally, taking us into March, one house budgets will be released. So that'll be part 2 of the exam. Hopefully this year we'll get all 3 budgets, the executive, the Senate, and the Assembly, to include our top priorities, to include NY Heat. But that's all the cards that'll be on the table at that point. So once the Senate, the Assembly, and the executive all have their proposed budgets, that'll then trigger 3-way budget negotiations. For those of you who have heard of the 3 men in a room expression, that's to explain what goes on with budget negotiations. This is a period of time that can be really challenging for lawmakers and advocates alike, because much of the budget negotiations happens outside of the public view. A lot of it is happening behind the scenes when it used to be 3 men that were actually in the leadership positions, a man who was the governor, a man who was the majority leader in the Senate, and the Speaker of the Assembly. That's where the 3 men in the room comes from. It's not 3 men anymore, but it's still the power dynamics are there. A lot of it's behind the scenes. So we'll have another mobilization to make sure that they know we're still watching and to pressure them to do the right thing for the final budget. That'll happen sometime in mid-March. And then finally, the statutory budget deadline in New York is April 1st for a final budget. Those of you who've been watching the past couple of years have seen that we've had late budgets. It's not unusual for New York to have late budgets. Hopefully we don't this year. We would love one that's on time for everybody's sanity. So ideally we'll have a budget done by April 1st. And with an excellent campaign timeline like this, I think there's a good shot we come out victorious. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lisa.
Thank you, Liz. That was quite a lot to absorb, but I know most of you have been through at least one legislative session with us before, so some of this will seem very familiar. And next, we're going to dive into these upcoming actions for December and January, because they will not be successful without the help of each and every one of you. So let's move to the next slide and dig in. This actually slide is for Andra. So Andra, if you want to just kick this slide off, and then I'm going to ask you, Lorenzo, to stop sharing so we can see each other for a minute. And I'm going to send you a message, Lorenzo, so be on the lookout for that. So Andra, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So I'm Andra Lehmann. I'm with Alliance for a Green Economy. My pronouns are she and her. I'm based out of Syracuse. And I wanted to talk to you about what we're going to be doing after the Building Electrification Equity Platform letter is delivered to Governor Hochul. That's going to happen the week of October 15th. And we're also going to have a call relay that week urging the governor to put the platform into her executive budget. And then we'll get ready for our first big action, actually 12 actions. So yes, on Thursday, December 12th, easy date to remember, 12/12/24, we're going to have a distributed day of action, 12 actions across New York State. So in order for this plan to work, we're going to need 12 different local hosts for these events. And the events can each have a different flavor, right? Based on what is good for your locale. For example, it could be held at an electrified building showing what the future of heating is. It could be held outside a utility office. It could be in a place where gas infrastructure is still being built out, a park in the community, a press conference at a government building, a hot chocolate event. You know, it could do anything. Being a host has some responsibilities. It would include determining the time and place of the event and identifying the speakers. And Renewable Heat Now will help with this. We can get you signs, shirts, media coordination. We can do outreach. We can help with press releases and getting quotes. So what we need from you is a yes. We need to know who wants to have a December 12th event in your region. So if you think that you at all might want to do that, please go to the Action Network link that I just shared in the chat and scroll down on the right-hand side and click the Host an Event button and fill out the info. I know that in this Zoom, we have a lot of experience and expertise in the room. So I would appreciate your sharing some of the more memorable local events that you have ever been a part of over the years. Taking a look at the clock, Lisa, do we have time for a discussion or should folks share in the chat?
Yeah, I think that it would be great to, first of all, Andra and I want to acknowledge that you're probably not ready to fill in your your event details tonight. You might need to talk to your organization or the people in your community and figure out where and when you can host this event. But we would love for you to start thinking about that. And we've already had some commitments. Yes, Sarah, in fact, the smell of the RHN chili is wafting up from the kitchen because my daughter is making the chili from the recipe last year. So I am having great chili tour memories. So yes, we would love for you to put in the chat some memorable local events you've done with Renewable Heat Now. Maybe they were in front of where the gas utility was digging up the streets, or a place where gas infrastructure was being put in. Maybe they were in a very inspiring all-electric building, or a building that had been retrofitted with heat pumps. Maybe you had an inspirational speaker from housing justice or youth, or a elected official who was inspiring you. So we'd love you to post in the chat real quick some memories of events that were memorable and what made them impactful or great. Just a few words. You don't have to write paragraphs. And we're going to take a couple of minutes to do that. You can also put in your ideas for where do you think we should have one of these events, even if you're not hosting it yourself. Where's a place you think we should have one? You're not committing to anything. You could just put your ideas. It could be a part of the state, a particular elected official's district, at a particular building or facility. Would love all of your ideas to come out there. I'll just give you guys a couple more minutes to brainstorm here. All right. Okay.
Lots of suggestions.
I love it. Keep them coming and keep sending them to me. And Andra is going to wrap us up here with signups and next steps. So go for it, Andra, and thank you.
Yes, great. So I can take the next slide now. Thank you. So yes, we are going to show and grow our grassroots power starting tonight. Next week, we're going to circulate the Building Electrification Equity Platform letter for organizations to sign on in the 2.5 weeks between September 25th and October 11th. That really is a quick turnaround. And we'll ask all of you to get any groups that you're part of, ask them to sign on. And please share the letter when you get it throughout your networks of allied organizations and businesses. All types of groups are welcome to sign on. Statewide, regional, local, neighborhood groups, faith groups, community groups, local businesses, HVAC businesses. Last year's letter had 221 signatories, and we're hoping to reach 300 for this letter. And with your help, we will. Then another thing that you should do is to sign up for the October 17th Power Hour right now, this evening, so you don't forget. And we hope that you'll get 2 friends to join you on that Power Hour next month. That would be really great. And please reach out to us as soon as you know whether your organization can host an event. On the 12th, we're going to be working on that, and we want to work on that as soon as possible, because with the more lead time, we get more word out, and the events tend to be bigger and more successful and better covered by media. And also, here's the sign-up link for the first Albany mobilization on January 29th. I'd advise you to sign up for that tonight as well while you're here, so that you will get all the updates as the transportation gets coordinated, as carpools are set up, and as we know more details about timing and speakers. And then, as always, stay tuned for all the information coming about call relays and social media actions. We really like to cook up some fun things all the time that help get our message out to Governor Hochul and to the legislature and to the people of New York. And here is one of our friends, Renewable Heat Meow. Can you see a little hand puppet that came home with me from our convening on the 9th and 10th. And we're going to be trying to get up some more fun things like that for all of us to do, because we've got to have the facts and we have to present them clearly. But if we're not having fun, then it's not working for me. So thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate your working with us on this, and stay in touch.
Thank you to Andra and all of our wonderful presenters, and to all of you who joined us tonight. We're going to post all those links again in the chat. Here is the Albany mobilization. We don't have the buses or transportation in there yet, so this is just a sort of preliminary sign up, and we'll be adding that information. Here's where you can sign up to host an event on the 12th. It's 12/12/24. So Andra and I are hoping we'll have at least 12 events around the state, because we love those beautiful numbers that come out so even. And here is the October 17th Power Hour sign up. That will come right after we've delivered the letter. So we'll be making calls to Governor Hochul to reinforce the letter messages at that time. So thanks everybody so much for coming. And we're very excited about our platform, and we really think we're going to have the best year ever for Building Decarb in New York and the Renewable Heat Now campaign. Thanks to all of you. Have a wonderful evening and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.